everybody, and welcome to the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education regularly scheduled meeting. Are we in compliance with open meeting laws?
Yes, we are.
Can you please call the roll?
Carlin?
Here.
Eliason?
Here.
Evans?
Here.
Garner?
Here.
Herzog?
Here.
Olmsted?
Here.
Eschel?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Okay, tonight we'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by 2 Oakwood students and 1 Tipler student.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So it's City Hall tomorrow. So we go on at 8:30, but I think common council is on before.
I was thinking of going to.
Yeah, so I think it's like.
All right, he's
well,
welcome
we go on,
anytime.
But I was gonna go before. Actually, Steph would know, because Steph's gonna go and she wanted to see Lori. So I think she's going, Lori Palmieri. So I think she's going to
All right.
the beginning of it.
So we'll go, I don't have anything for the board president's report, so we'll go right into the superintendent's good news report.
Yes, good evening. Today's Superintendent's Report, good news report for March 7th, 2018. This is kind of a different arrangement, so I've got to get used to just paying attention to the script. Congratulations to Oshkosh North High School senior Dalton Holmes, who qualified for the state wrestling tournament and finished the season 39-5 record. Dalton recorded over 100 victories in his high school career. Oakwood Elementary students participated in the 2018 Olympics during their FIAD classes, learning about practicing skills, speed skating, cross-country, skiing, curling, and bobsledding, among other sports. At Reed Elementary School, it's Technology Night in February. Every family was provided with a book to read at home and a bookmark to help with the discussion in the school's one-to-one book event kickoff. Students at Webster Elementary School celebrated Read Across America Week with dress-themed days, which included a day where students wore as many colors as possible, a day where they could wear pajamas, a day where they could wear crazy hair and wear crazy socks, as well as a day in which the clothing items they wore other clothing items with writing on them. Each day, each dress was celebrated with one of the mini Dr. Seuss books. The classroom also had a guest reader in each case. Congratulations to Oakwood Elementary students who, under the leadership of Oakwood's 5th grade, entered into the Keep America Beautiful National Recycling Bowl competition, and they worked to collect the most recyclables generated from school use. The school received a compost bin from Winnebago County Solid Waste Department for winning at the local level, but also won at the state level. Great job for their participation in that effort. 4th and 5th grade students at Washington Elementary School recently had an opportunity to meet the author of the memoir Tasting the Sky and participate in an interesting conversation about the joy of writing. Family Math Night at Jefferson Elementary School included many fun stations that families rotated through. They participated in Bridges Math, a math tool to take home, made estimates, read math-related books, checked out games from the Media Center. South Park's Gaming Club students and advisor shared a new strategy for games, and the owner of Adventure Games and a Jefferson parent shared some new games. Door prizes were donated by the community businesses and were earned by those who visited the stations, and had a great time for all who participated. 4th grade students at Washington Elementary School kicked off their general study with a mystery tasting event that they had the opportunity to explore and select a few titles and check out and read from a general collection. Thursday, or Jefferson Elementary School's gym became a winter obstacle course for students during the winter walk to school. Students navigated through snow piles and using the penguin shuffle, as you notice for our safety outside of our buildings, and were kept on track of how they walked for their 3-day time frame. Thanks to funding from the PTO, Emmeline Cook Elementary School students and families received the book, The One and Only Ivan, for their one school book project. During March, those families who read the book will track their time and turn in the slips weekly. The prize for spending time reading, free ticket to the Timber Rattlers game. What a great way to promote effective readers. Jefferson Elementary students and staff enjoyed Read Across America Week in February with themed days, a birthday cake in honor of Dr. Seuss, and writing book recommendations and reading. Here are some of the photos from Roosevelt Elementary students who celebrated Dr. Seuss Week and themes for that and events for that week. In an effort to help foster social relationships between students and with disabilities and their regular education peers, Oshkosh North High School hosted the second annual special Valentine's Day dance. The evening included DJ, photographer, prizes, and a king and queen coronation. Thanks to all those who made the event possible. In Emmeline Cook Elementary School, students also celebrated Dr. Seuss with dress-up days, and each classroom held events with their school buddies to commemorate Dr. Seuss' birthday. One in which it included eating green eggs and ham. And congratulations to Oshkosh West High School girls bowling team who finished second at the state high school bowling championship competition in Wausau this past weekend. And here are events attended by the superintendent in this very short period of time between last
it's only a
meeting
week.
and today's meeting.
Nice.
I did need to let our band director at North know that I was thinking about him at 4 o'clock yesterday morning, worried that if we cancel school, they would have to find an alternative date for the second time for their winter band concert. And Jim was very pleased that we did not cancel school yesterday and the concert could go on as planned. With that completes the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, are there any other, okay, so now we have a district's administrator supplemental report regarding our AGR schools. And I was wondering if we could just address some of the questions that have been asked.
Yep.
I know it's a written report, but we did have,
I don't know if you want, if we can pull up EduClimber, we can show you real lifetime data that also supports that. If you would like to do that.
okay.
It's totally up to you guys.
I don't know,
We
I
don't-
just,
Or we don't have to.
I'm not sure if I know that I want that or not.
Okay, it's actually very good and we will.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually
Okay.
very good. It's up to you guys.
Okay.
Okay. Let me log in. All right. I have it all set. Okay. Do you want to start talking about
Yep.
and then I'll.
Okay. So the AGI report, we have 3 of our schools that are participating in that with the AGR. Or
Isn't it 4?
Yeah,
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 okay.
sorry.
It's okay.
And so I know you had some specific questions, so do you
Yeah.
want to just?
Well, the one I specifically wanted to address, and it was brought up by somebody in the community, and so it's a good chance for us to just kind of throw this out
Absolutely.
in the open. Specifically, the goal, I understand, especially,
Yes.
the goal is to get kids to 85%, or
Correct.
85% of the kids get to. And when
Correct.
we look at where they're at now, we're over halfway,
Mhm.
and I see 0%, I break out in hives.
So realize that they filled out this report more in like end of January.
Okay.
You know, so that's not where exactly they are today on March 7th. And so that's what Julie's going to share with you, is where some of the students are.
Okay.
And know that what they have as a benchmark is an end of the year goal. So for kindergarten.
So could you be at 0 and still get to 85?
You could.
Okay, so it's not
Right,
impossible.
because 4 is the goal. is to be there at the end of the year
Yep.
for kindergarten. But
Yep.
for example, for kindergartners, you want to be at a level 4 at the end of the year.
Yep.
So you could have several kids who are all at a level 3, but they have not met that goal
Got it.
yet of being at a level
Okay,
4.
good.
They certainly could meet that by the end of the
Okay.
year. So great question.
Okay, awesome.
So, let me show you exactly where, so for example, one of your questions was, there is, okay, so as you can see up here for the winter benchmark, where we would expect kindergartners to be, right now, we have 12 out of 17, because that's how many children are sitting in
Yep.
the seats right now.
Yep.
12 out of 17 are
At
at
or
the
above.
winter benchmark. And so if we pull this up, and by the way, I have this in top secret mode.
So you can't
So
see student names.
You can't see student names. So there's this many students, but as you can see, because the 4 is at grade level at the end of the school
Right.
year.
Okay.
These are where the children are right now.
It's,
Right.
it would I wonder if like that form, I think the form
But
is
they
really
have to
misleading.
fill out
I
that,
know,
'cause
it's the
yeah,
form that's
that
misleading.
form is dictated to us,
Okay.
so it has to be end of the year results. So it might, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, but
It's
in
scary,
June, you will
right?
get to see where
Okay.
all of the students are.
And they're
to the end of the
right
year
on
goal.
track to make it to 4.
They're on
They
track.
are right on track.
Okay.
Actually, this is really impressive to be at, we have 70.59% on track
Okay.
right now.
Good.
So then another one up there would be like Washington, so I can click this
I think
on.
eCook was the one that had the 0.
Oh, no,
E-
actually
no,
Jefferson.
Was it Jefferson? Okay,
Yep.
sorry.
Mhm.
Yep.
eCook is not a AGR school.
Oh,
So, yep.
right.
But we can pull up eCook if you
Okay.
like. But here is, here's kindergarten for Washington. And so Washington,
Okay.
you can see where at or above benchmark. You can
Most.
see where the majority of the kids are.
Okay.
So our student, we are on track. It does look
Okay.
deceiving because
is.
we have
Yeah.
to report
That form
based
is-
on the end of the year
It's not
assessment.
helpful at all.
So, no, at times it's not helpful. But, and it looks, and I agree with you, it looks alarming. So, but like here for Washington, we have 82% of kindergartners are on track to meet benchmark.
Okay.
So, by the way, I love EduClimber.
I can tell.
Because you can just pull this up right now. I mean, we can pull up any grade level right now, real time, and you can see, are they on track or not on track?
Correct.
So,
She's like, do you want me to pull it up? I can pull it up.
Can I please?
And then we got to go in top secret mode. It was
Well,
even
and
better.
it's helpful
So-
because, again, you are seeing end of the year
Year
results,
results.
and then you can see where are we, because we do have different goals of where kids need to be.
Correct.
To get to 4 by the
Yeah,
end of the year?
To get to
Yes.
4 by the end
Okay.
of the year.
Because we want to be progress monitoring. So like here is Webster. Webster, we have 91% of students are on track.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we have really great things going. Our teachers are really, they're putting strategies in place, the interventions. Kim and I are currently going out to schools. We're now at 8
Yeah,
of the
we
22 schools.
We visited 8 of them.
And we're in our monitoring mode right now,
Okay.
and we're going through and we're looking at each of the data pieces to say, are we on track to meet benchmark when we get to the end of the year?
Okay. So
Mhm.
constantly taken care of. Okay.
Absolutely.
And then the other idea, or the other question I have is really around the distinction that was made in that email, which was,
Mhm.
is it, there's a discrepancy
Yep.
between
Yep.
schools on, in a certain area versus other schools.
Yep.
And that's based on the report card that we get, which measures all sorts of things.
Correct.
So when you do look through each of them, there is a pretty
Correct. And
big
so
discrepancy.
if you recall, back on November 28th, and we had education committee in the evening. It was 2 hours, and I
Mhm.
think everybody was there but
Mhm.
Bob. I think Bob wasn't.
right.
But we went through, and if you remember, like in the packet and the data that we shared, we had that spreadsheet that we pulled up, and we went through and we analyzed everything, every single grade level and every single school,
Mhm.
and looked at, are we meeting benchmark when it comes to growth, and are we meeting benchmark when it comes to curriculum implementation? And when we shared that spreadsheet, we had schools in certain grade levels that were not meeting
Yep.
growth, and were not meeting the benchmarks for what we figured were curriculum implementation. And so we had curriculum implementation focus, and we
Okay.
had growth-focused schools. And if you recall, we had them very clearly laid out by grade level and by school, which areas and the strategies that we were using for each of those. And monitoring and visiting the schools is part of that.
Okay.
With the idea of we got to stay on track,
Mhm.
but also support. Our
Correct.
teachers really need support.
Yeah,
And one thing that they're really struggling with, and you can ask any teacher, and actually I was at the chiropractor yesterday, and the chiropractor's talking to me, well, he's doing his chiropractor thing, and he said to me, you know, I work with a lot of teachers, and one thing they constantly say to me is like, it's a struggle every day. We really need to teach. There's a lot of things going on for these children. And he goes, how do you address that? And I said, that right now is the question is how do we meet the mental health needs? How do we meet the needs of the social emotional pieces of students? And if we start to analyze this and we can get help for students, we can get interventions in place that start to get students in the realm that they can learn, that's half the battle right now. So we can have the best curriculum in the world, but if a child in that moment is not ready to learn because of a whole bunch of reasons, they're not ready to learn.
So if you were to ask teachers if I were to say, look, if money and resources were not an issue, what do you want? What would they say?
It would be help with the whole
Social
behavioral,
emotional.
social, emotional realm.
Yes.
I
All
truly
right.
believe.
Yes, and actually, we've been asking that question, you know,
We
now
have.
that we're in this point, if you could wave a magic wand, what opportunity would you take advantage of?
Yeah.
And what barrier would you wave away?
Yeah.
And in 9 times out of 10, it's
Correct.
social emotional, it's we need additional counseling help, we need additional behavioral interventionist help. It's those types of things that.
It's in that ballpark.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
And I would add to that cultural specialists to assist us in some areas.
Absolutely, and the cultural responsive piece as well.
Right.
Yes.
Mhm.
All right.
Yep.
Well, those were my questions.
Okay.
Does anybody else have anything? Sure, Barb.
I noticed on the 3 reports from Roosevelt, Webster, and it's Jefferson,
Yep.
the right-hand most column was only filled out by Roosevelt, I believe. And I found that disappointing because the other 2 were missing, that right-hand most column, on describing which strategies to reduce the achievement gap. And of those listed, those were pretty generic. Class size reduction in and of itself historically has not made a difference unless there are other
Absolutely.
changes that are implemented. So to me, that column would be more valuable if it included interventions that were tried, including things that were just mentioned, like culturally responsive curriculum, individual learning plans, and so on. But to just say, we do class size reduction and instruction coaching,
And again, it's
That's
that
very little
DPI
information.
report says what
Right.
they have to put in
In
there,
there.
and it
Yep.
asks you to put in either class size reduction, instructional coaching, or one-to-one tutoring.
And they only
But
want
when we
one of those
present
3
in June,
answers.
they can share additional information about the exact strategies that they utilized.
Mhm.
But on this chart that we have to fill out, they had to fill out one of those 3, 1 or 2 of the, or how many strategies they're utilizing. So, but we'll share more in June when they report out.
all right.
Because it goes so much beyond the DPI report.
Yeah,
I
that
think so.
report is almost, I hate to say it, it's kind of useless, really, because it doesn't give us the information that we need.
Oh, sorry.
That's, we follow the rules and that's
Yeah, yeah,
what
gotta
we
follow
do.
the rules, gotta follow the forms.
This is not an exercise in creative writing.
No.
It's not.
No,
But even the data wasn't helpful.
No.
Which is
correct,
sad.
because it's that end of the year, and
Yeah.
it's, so where are we
Okay.
right now?
Mhm.
Yes.
Compared to then.
Any other questions?
Any other questions, or do you need to pull up?
Well, thank you for doing this last minute. I know we kind of
Absolutely. No,
threw you
thank
out there,
for
but thank you so
asking.
much.
I appreciate your questions, because you're not the only ones. There's many people who read the report saying, I have questions, and you
Yeah.
have just helped them
Good.
have a better understanding, so thank you.
All right, thanks. Thank you, ladies. Do we have other reports by committee chairs?
Education.
Yep.
Okay, so the Education Committee met on Thursday, March 1st at 8:30 in the morning. A parent joined our meeting to talk about the OASD approach to dyslexia. The exchange was so enlightening that we decided that it warranted another meeting, so we will be regrouping on this topic on April 5th at 6 p.m. We've changed the time so more parents can attend if they're interested in joining. We also received an update from Julie Conrad on the science field test updates. Julie talked about the next generation science standards that were approved in October 2016 and adopted by the state of Wisconsin in November 2017. With the addition of Science Connections, the district is currently completely aligned with the state, and professional development has been ongoing with teachers. And a resource that will fit our needs has yet to be determined. For more detail on what's been going on, I urge people to check the minutes, but the short of it is that in December, the district met to talk about some of the issues regarding the new next generation science standards. And in January, 223 elementary science teachers completed an online Canvas course on NGSS, Next Generation Science Standards. In April, on the early release day, we will be meeting again with K through 5s and grades 6 through 8 regarding the curriculum, and the outcome of that meeting will be either recommend adoption by the board of a new program, continue with field testing for more data, or restart a search for an anchor science resource. So great stuff going on there. We also had an update on the literacy survey from Kim Brown. The Literacy Lenses Survey was created so that attitude and aspiration perceptions data could be measured. The literacy survey was given to all staff, K-12, and all students in grades 3 through 12. At the January meeting, all administration meetings, principals reviewed the survey results for patterns and asked questions regarding data comparisons. They discussed culture and mindset as evidence to support perceptions for both students and staff. Administrative staff was provided with additional questions to look at when meeting with their staff and discussed how to go about sharing the data with staff. Principals returned to another all administrators meeting in February where they shared information about the feedback received from staff on the survey results and discussed how the data was used. A lot of insightful information resulted from the survey. The perception information and data information was looked at side by side to help see the comparisons. And at the elementary level, data shows that kids like to read and write, which was originally thought to be the opposite, and students at the middle school level and high school level felt there was no time to read for enjoyment due to the amount of homework given, which is kind of sad. Students said they like to read, but they like to choose what they read, and then in writing, the same pattern showed up. Outside of school, students enjoyed blogging and writing, but felt they had no choices at school to write in expressive ways. There are things that our teachers must teach, but it's important to keep the interests of students and providing choice pieces as well. And the survey indicated that kids understand the importance of reading and writing as compared to what we've been hearing. So it was really good information, really exciting meeting. We adjourned at 9:40, and our next meeting will be focusing on the issue of how we address dyslexia in the district, and it will be April 5th at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other committees? Okay, then we will go right into our first workshop, which is the Learning Partnership with Mr. Ron Kenwell via Skype. So, this is exciting. That's why we're sitting funny. They call it goofy. Skateboard with the sitting goofy. Oh.
That's not good.
Hello.
Hi, Ron.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you very well. I have to say you scared the bejesus out of me because my microphone sound was so high.
Oh.
that I think my hairline receded a couple inches here. I'm good.
Good. Okay, well, so I'm Allison Garner. I'm one of 7 board members. So we have 7 board members in the room, and we also have, I don't know, maybe about 10 central district administrators. And we have one lucky person in the audience that gets to watch tonight. She's also running for the board, so. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve and let him facilitate the rest of this. How's that sound?
Terrific.
Okay.
We're going to get to see him, or is it just going to be us?
Watching ourselves.
Hey Ron, do you have your camera on?
Oh, wait a second. I should have it on. Hold on. And you should. There I am.
There you go. That was our goal.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that. I was realizing, I was saying, how come I'm not seeing you? Okay, I'm good. By the way, I'm situated just at my home in my kitchen, which is one of my favorite places to be, so.
Well, good evening, Ron, and thank you again for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Yes, so we've had the opportunity to speak on a couple of occasions, and I've got a few points and maybe an outline that we could cover, but I know from experience that if I let you just speak from the gut level, you'll give us a great picture of the learning partnership. I imagine some background would be helpful. So I'm wondering if I want to start with, maybe briefly, the education landscape in Canada versus the US, sort of how structure and finance and public-private, that sort of thing. Maybe the history of the learning partnership, and maybe just a bit on your personal history, if that sounds okay.
That sounds great, Steve. Thank you very much. Firstly, folks, thank you very, very much. I've been looking forward to this, and Steve and I communicated before Christmas time as well. We talked, and unfortunately, I had a personal issue with my mom who passed away, but if I could live to 94 years old like my mom did, independently and totally lucid, boy, that's one of my dreams. So again, thank you for your patience, and Steve, thank you for reaching out as well. I really appreciate this.
Sure.
So I'm Ron Canuel, and I'm celebrating my 42nd year in public education. Believe it or not, I started teaching in 1976, where I had a hair and a beard. And so the beard was purposely taken off, the hair not, but it is what it is. I'm proud to say that in my career in public education in Canada, I basically almost covered every position that one would consider in education, starting with a teacher, 14 years as a teacher. Then I was a vice principal in an inner city high school in Montreal. Then we was a principal in a suburban context, again in Montreal, a large high school where they had a very big computer center, and this was in 1991. After that, assistant director of human resources, and then from 1999 to 2010, I was what they call in Quebec. We still use Napoleonic terms, by the way, so I was the director general of a school board. And I know my colleagues in the United States, they always love that term when I would say I'm the director general, as opposed to the superintendent or just the director. So I was in that position until 2010. And then I used a word that is quite frankly what I would consider a rather dated word, retired. Doesn't really mean much anymore, since there are a lot of quote-unquote retired people who are still working, especially in Canada. For 6.5 years, I was the Chief Executive Officer for the Canadian Education Association. And then starting in September of this year, I joined the Learning Partnership in Canada. And so I'm their CEO and president of the association, which is a not-for-profit charity. So I'll start just with a brief description of the Learning Partnership. So being a not-for-profit charity, it was founded in 1992. And we are basically what you would say is a compendium of business, government, and school boards brought together under one roof. And so on my board of directors, I happen to have a number of very key executives from some of the major corporations in Canada, as well as representation from school board directors, as well as representation from parent groups and universities in Canada as well. So it's a very broad range of people who are on our board. And one of the things that when I arrived at the Learning Partnership, and one of the things that I kind of emphasized to the board members when they were hiring me was they asked me, they said, well, would you be willing to join us? And I said, well, on one condition. And the one condition was that if from the world of business, what would be very important is that you listen to the needs of educators as opposed to telling educators what they need. And they agreed. And there's a nuance there, but it was a very, very important nuance for me. And so I moved in and I said, yes, I'm willing to take this on. So we offer programs across Canada in a variety of areas, in both entrepreneurial context, career awareness context, welcome to kindergarten programs. We look at also coding in terms of programming technology. So we have a wide range of program diversification across Canada. So that kind of gives you a brief overview of this. And the number of students who are involved in our program by Canadian standards is the largest in Canada. We're close to about 750,000 students who are involved in various number of our programs across Canada. So for my American colleagues, I always usually tell them Canada is 1/10 of the United States. Yeah. So any number that I'm throwing out to you, if you multiply by 10, that would give you probably a good U.S. Version of the size of what we do. Now, the Canadian jurisdiction, by the way, the Canadian landscape in education is a very, very unique one. We are basically also right now currently ranked in the top 3 education systems in the world. And what makes Canada even very unique amongst in that context is that there is no centralized Ministry of Education, or we say State Department of Education. There's no federal jurisdiction in this, so every province and territory in Canada has their own ministries of education. And what that does is that it brings about a very different type of, let's just say, headspace, such that depending on the government that's in power in the province, whether it be a left government or a right government or a centrist government, they tend to kind of look, next door. What are they doing next door? How are they approaching things? So it tends to, what I would say, moderate how we find education going in Canada. So as a result, you don't get these wild fluctuations to one side or the other. So we did see a few years ago this move towards the basics. All of a sudden, literacy, numeracy, the whole notion of skills and skill-based assessments. But it was, again, never really went that far. It always moved back towards the middle. So in Canada, what we tend to find ourselves in is, and one of the reasons why the education system is so strong, is a major focus on equity. So there's a focus very much on equity, not equality, but equity. In other words, it's very important to be able to allocate resources and develop whatever you have, but allocate the resources where there are very specific needs, as opposed to other areas where they're less needy. So it creates this type of a juggling going on in Canada. So we have different curriculums, but for the most part, they are all what we would consider rather progressive curriculum. We still have testing going on in provinces across Canada in terms of standardized tests, but there is now, I can honestly state to you, a very, very clear move to moving even away from those type of assessments. And there's a major study that's coming out in Canada very, very soon that's going to be talking about the skill sets that will be needed for the future generations and the future children. And this is a very exhaustive study that's been done. And what they were focusing on and what they've come out with the 5 major skill sets that they've now identified, and I wrote them down, is firstly is active listening, secondly speaking, third critical thinking, fourth reading comprehension, and fifth social perceptiveness. And all of a sudden, if you want to say like the whole shift where we used to see things about, say, STEM education or very highly skilled, is all being pushed to the side now. To say, well, we're noticing these trends that are happening in our industries and in our society, and as a result, these are the type of people we want to function within Canada, to be successful in Canada. Now, what's interesting is that Google themselves in December of this past year, 2017, did a study, a 10-year study, exhaustive study of their hiring of people in Google, and how the people that they were hired and who have been hired over this 10-year period of time, how they have fared within Google, and have they moved up, say, the corporate body of Google. And most interestingly is what they discovered was that the people that were originally hired, say with the PhDs, the masters in programming, coding, algorithmic design, or whatever, are basically the people who have not been promoted. And what they discovered was that most of the people who have been promoted in Google were the ones who were actually demonstrating the very specific skill sets I was talking to you about. In other words, the willingness to work in teams, the willingness to be creative, the willingness to be collaborative. And so they themselves at Google have even announced that they're shifting their hiring pattern so that they will, quote unquote, develop skills with people who are in their organization, but they're looking more for these personal traits, these attributes within individuals. So this is resonating across Canada as well now, so that we're going to have this type of shift. At the OECD, we know that with PISA results, and the United States are involved in this testing and everything as well, they're shifting as well. They're now shifting their focus of competencies away from the traditional sets. Now, I do say that I did have the opportunity to look at your website, go over to take a look at your schools as well, and I can congratulate you because I can see clearly that within a number of your schools, you're moving that way. And I know it's not an easy shift. I know some people will kind of push back and say, no, we need to focus on literacy, we need to focus on that. But on the other hand, it's kind of thinking about where are our children going to be in the future. And so I think I was mentioning this to Steve even yesterday, that in Canada, we had a number of career education programs, and I was just talking to a deputy minister recently who said, well, you know, we plan on doing these career education programs starting in grade 9 and grade 10. And I said to the minister, deputy minister, I said, well, that's interesting. I said, but most grade 9 and grade 10 kids that I know don't even know what they're doing on the weekend, let alone figuring out what they're going to do in a career, you know, like this or in the future. And so, you know, we have to be very conscious of you know, how things are shifting, because we have a traditional response to saying, well, you know, like, this is the way I knew education to be, so why shouldn't it be the same way? It served me well. And that's right. I mean, I know when I've talked about innovation in conferences around the world, people will say to me, well, you know, Ron, you kind of suggest, or people suggest that our education system is not that good. Well, take a look around us. And if I look at the United States, remarkable. Look at Canada, remarkable. So it's not to suggest that whatever we've done has not been good, but rather, on the other hand, what we have to take into account is the fact that things are changing and shifting. And in Canada right now, I can certainly speak that the notion of being the global competitor is now being replaced with the global citizen. In other words, getting people to work more within a context of global citizenship rather than global competition. Because that would be seen as a means of moving forward and achieving success for students. So there's a focus on skills, still there, but there's a greater focus now on how do we take these skills and apply them across a curriculum as well. How's that for a quick overview?
You know what I mean? We'll just let you go. But Rod, I wonder if I could jump. We had a wonderful segue from our previous presentation on the critical need for student and educator well-being, which is the conversation we talked about, topic we talked about yesterday. Could you dive into that one, the number one priority for your organization?
Say that again.
The sort of student and educator well-being and wellness coming to the game.
Yeah, this is something even in our association we're now shifting towards, because in Canada there have been a number of surveys and studies done with both, well, let's just say, I can even tell you, trustees, superintendents, principals, teachers, students, non-teaching professionals. The number one priority is well-being. Now all of a sudden people are starting to recognize that the stresses of society and what's being brought upon, schools are the ones that receive all of this. They're the first, if you want to say, you know, line of defense or attack, whatever, however you want to put it, but they're the first line of where all of this comes in. So any societal stresses that we see, it are the schools that very often will manifest these stresses immediately, and I mean very quickly. Case in point, in Canada, we have a very open door policy with respect to refugees, and Canadians are very, very pleased about this type of approach. However, there's a price to pay for this, and I say a price to pay. Well, what's happening is that in the case of the Syrian refugees, we had tens of thousands who came into Canada, and what the educators reported back to us is that they were pleased to receive these students in the classrooms, but when some of these students were starting to demonstrate post-traumatic stress disorders, they weren't trained for this. They weren't prepared for this. So you know, as much as our politicians from one side said, you know, come on in and bring all these kids in, the education system was left to kind of respond. And so all of a sudden now these issues have brought about different things. And then you have the societal stresses. You have the different notions of what's happening in society. You have conflict, you've got stress, you've got anxiety, workplace stressors, all of these areas. And they're manifesting themselves now even with our educators. And so these areas need to be attended to as well. And at the Learning Partnership, we are actually going to make this one of our key priorities. And not surprisingly, in the ministries and the corporations that we have spoken to, there's not one person who has said no. They've all agreed.
I wonder next, Ron, if we could dive into sort of the mechanics or the nuts and bolts of what does it look like when a school system collaborates, partners with a major commercial employer like Royal Bank of Canada or Bombardier or an accounting firm or whomever that might be.
Yeah, well, again, that's, as I mentioned to you before, just when I arrived, that was one of the critical components for me, and that is, you know, no one has, everybody has an opinion about education. That's because everyone has gotten an education. And so everyone has an opinion, everyone has their field that they have to say about it, and that's right, they do. But on the other hand, very often what people fail to understand is that an education system, and you would know this as trustees, if 80 to 85% of your budget, 85% of your budget is in people, is in salaries, it's in everything you do. So as a result, it means that you're dealing with people. And then everything else that you try to do and the struggles you have, and I know when I was a director of a school district, when we had to cut back on budgets and everything like this, the first thing we did is we looked at the walls, we looked at the buildings, we looked at everything, but not the classroom, because we didn't want to affect the classroom. But that's where all the activity is. So your margin of maneuver is very, very small. So for many corporations in Canada, when we talk to them about this, we highlight this to them to say, well, you can't use the same type of metrics that you use, say, to look at the efficiencies of your company and apply them into a classroom. I know that in Canada, there was at one time there was a discussion in some provinces about merit pay. In other words, do we pay teachers on performance? And right away, one of the phys ed teachers said, oh yeah, how are you going to do that with me? Or the drama teacher, oh yeah, how are you going to do that with me? Or the language teacher, well, you might measure it through testing, but then at that point, testing becomes not a learning process, but a coercive issue. And then the minute that happens, you just put in this type of toxicity into the system. So in Canada, they've really pushed away from any type of that type of measurement, and looking at it in terms of how do we move forward. The other thing that I was mentioning to Steve is very often we try, well, we're going to try to reform the world of education. And again, in the conferences that I've given, what's always been fascinating to me, and I'm not professing I knew the answer. To be honest with you, I only found out the answer in 2011. But it was when I asked the question finally, well, who created our systems? Who created our education system? And lo and behold, when I was at the CEA, the Canadian Education Association, we did research and we discovered that the education system as we know it, the primary school system and the secondary school system, were actually designed from two committees from Harvard University, Dr. Charles Elliott, the Committee of 10 and the Committee of 15. And these two committees were made up primarily of industrialists and academicians from Harvard. And their notion of education at that time was a very fundamental, basal type of approach. They saw an untapped labor force in children running around in the streets, who were illiterate. And they felt that because of the Industrial Revolution going on, they needed some sort of productivity, but they needed people who could work in factories who knew how to read and write and count. That was it. There was never this aspiration that we're going to do an education system so that they can go to higher education. That was never the intent. So what they did was they created firstly a secondary school system, and then they created the primary school system. And from their own experience and understanding of learning, and from their own work experience, they made it as a production line. So what we see, the kindergarten grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 12, is in effect very much a production line. And when you look at it, you just step back and you say, okay, and how's it organized? Well, it's organized very much in a very factory model style. And that's the system that has not changed. And so when we talk of reforming the system, if we don't know what we're dealing with in terms of the origins of the system, it makes it very difficult so that we kind of like tweak it, we do different things with it. But from a neuroscience point of view and a research point of view, there's no research that indicates that a child should start schooling at the age of 6. Doesn't exist, but it's a societal norm. So we struggle, and you as trustees and the directors as well, struggle with the notion of knowing that children are very different, vastly different. They learn in very different ways. And how do you adjust? How do you cope? And I think one of the things is by looking at what schools do themselves and investigate closer how the schools operate. So I'm going to lead to another topic here that Steve and I talked about in Canada, which was again based on a research that came out about a year and a half ago from Learning Forward, it's a US-based organization. But they did an entire study of professional development models in Canada, in schools, and what worked and what didn't work. And what they discovered was that the very traditional models of professional development that are currently offered in school boards in Canada, which is basically assemble teachers or administrators in a group and you have them talk and you go over certain things with them, is for the most part a very poor model of development. Most teachers, as a matter of fact, research is unequivocal that most teachers and administrators who participate in these types of activities will very often state to you that they found the content very interesting, very enlightening, but virtually impossible to implement because the minute they walk back into their classroom, the day-to-day took over. All of a sudden, it was just about being involved in the day-to-day activities, and they just never had a chance, the time to implement. So in Canada, when they looked at this research, they studied more what were the models that had actually worked. And what I would respectfully suggest to you is the models that actually work more than anything. One second here. The models that, you still see me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So the models that actually work are the models where you ask the schools to identify their needs first. And you ask the schools to say, okay, if these are your immediate needs, then these are the immediate needs we need to address. And when you address these needs, firstly, you do two things. You're developing proprietorship. In other words, the people, the teachers, the administrators in the schools feel that these are needs that have been identified by them. They own it. Now they own it. And then when you ask them to say, okay, how do we measure the progress in terms of how we can better improve these situations, then they get into measurement. But it's measurements that they have adopted and taken upon themselves to say, here's how we can feel. The minute you start doing this, all of a sudden you're going to attend to their very specific school local needs. And then from a school district point of view, you can then say, okay, here's our vision, here's where we want to be. Now, you tell us, what do we need to do to provide you with these resources? And that's where I get back to where in Canada the equity issue prevails much more over equality. So as a result, you have many districts in Canada that will do this now more and more. It's taking some time, it's not happening overnight. But that it will take some time to then identify these areas and say, okay, I'm going to give you these specific resources because it's specific to your school. And that's a departure. And it is a departure for many school districts. I know in the past, I was in British Columbia not too long ago. I spoke to the School Board Association there. And some of the trustees didn't like that. They basically stated to me, well, they said, no, Ron. They said, we can't do that. That's just not feasible. We just need to be able to provide whatever we think we need to have done in our schools. And I told them, well, you're just going down the same path that's been in existence for 40 years. And in 10 years from now, you're going to be asking yourself the same question. How come we can't make these changes happen faster? So it's getting that proprietorship at the school level that we've noticed has made a big difference and a greater difference. So how's that, Steve? Is that covering everything?
Yeah, beautiful, Ron. I'd like to invite anyone else to jump in on the conversation with any questions from our board, from our administrative team.
Please.
I don't know if there's anything, otherwise we'll keep going.
Just one point, I don't remember the decade, but I know that there was a Canadian who came and visited our district. I believe he may have been from Saskatchewan, and I believe his name was Michel Stravinsky. And one of the things that Michael promoted, this was probably in the 1990s, was the notion of measuring. Not just saying we did something, but how well did we do that? And he shared some stories about people saying, well, some things you can't measure. And so his response to that was, that's fine, but we will put money and resources behind the things that we can measure. And I thought that was a very interesting approach to looking at not just inputs and outputs, but looking at results. And I just think that's really important.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a very good point. And what I can say is, in the models that, because we've been using these models myself in schools in Canada in the last 2 or 3 years, where we would say, when the teachers were saying, well, we need to improve this, and I would say, well, how do you want to measure the improvement? What was interesting was that their initial response was, I'm not trying to say, well, we need to, if you want to improve something, we need to understand how you want to measure. And so what it did was, they moved into a reflective mode. And not a reactive mode. So they started to reflect more. And what we found was that they would come up with their own indicators. Even though they were, let's just say, quite unorthodox, nonetheless, if they found that these were a valid indicator, that we were able to measure how we would improve things, they felt that was a worthwhile enterprise. And so we would never, quote unquote, just allow them to identify things that needed to be improved without them identifying how we can measure that improvement. And the key is there, the proprietorship of that measurement, that all of a sudden it belongs to them, since they identify the needs. I can tell you as well that when the schools would normally come up with their priority needs, the average number of needs that they would come up with was, in our experience, was about 23 needs. And we would tell them, well, we can't work on 23 needs, it's impossible in one school. So let's narrow that down to 3 or 4 needs, very specific. And they were able to do that, and they voted on them, by the way. So we had the staff always vote on these needs. The following year when we came back, I'll never recall, I won't forget this, one of the teachers said, well, why are we still talking about all of this? And I didn't even have to answer. The other teachers said, shut up. You know, you identified it as one of the big needs last year, and we're going to do it again. So all of a sudden, you saw that they were taking this ownership. And the principal as well thought that it was a wonderful exercise because, again, the principal then became a player in all of this rather than just simply pushing people into it.
Excuse me, I did find the reference here to Michel Stravinsky. He was superintendent of schools in Edmonton, so that would be Alberta. I was off by one province.
That's right.
Spearheaded the district's transition to a school-based decision-making organization, the first of its kind in a large North American school jurisdiction. He had visited Oshkosh at a time when the district was investing heavily in professional development in the area of continuous improvement, which is still included in our board policy. So he obviously made a mark in Alberta and probably other places in Canada, and I was impressed with the message that he brought us several years ago.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear. You know, I mean, it always represents something of a departure from what we've done, but we have to recognize as well that, you know, whatever you've tried in the past that hasn't succeeded, it's for a reason. And so in this case here, and I'm not trying to suggest that Canada's got the magic bullet in terms of how to improve things. It doesn't. There are certain issues and that truly some very complicated contexts in all of this. But I think it's the approach that we certainly advocate, even at the Learning Partnership, is to, one of the expressions is great minds don't think alike.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
When Steve first brought your organization to my attention, Steve and I had the discussion about the fact that no such organization across the states now exists as a business partnership, and I indicated to him that Minnesota has something that's called the Minnesota Education Business Partnership, of which is opposite. Their operation is opposite of what you said was a condition of your employment with your organization. The Minnesota Education Business Partnership is business trying to tell education how to do their business. And you said you would refuse that, taking the job if they weren't ready to acknowledge the fact that the comparison, it simply would not work. And I was pleased to hear that, because my experience with the Minnesota Business Education Partnership is they have not become sophisticated enough to recognize that again, businesses that are 80% capital and in investment because they're manufacturer or they're other kind of, and are not 80% employees working with children. And your organization, of which I did share with the entire school board, I happen to be the superintendent of schools. I did share the annual report. Now, that was the year before you came, but we downloaded the annual report, so I made sure that board members received it when we first started talking about making arrangements to meet with you. And I was not necessarily fully reading that into that annual report. I would look forward to seeing your annual report after this year of your service with the organization to see how the direction has changed, because I have thoroughly read and explored your organization, and I find it exciting, but under your leadership direction, it is taking a different direction than the past organization.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, from the corporate point of view, and even as with talking with my board members as well, the expertise that they have is very profound and very insightful, because their ability to actually, what I would say, like in the case of the development of a strategic plan, that they have a very much clearer idea in terms of what are the type of outcomes, like to say in 3 years from now, like what is it specifically you're going to stand for. So their insights there, I find, are critical, and I think that type of insight, in the world of public education is invaluable. Where I kind of put my hand up and say, hey, hold on a second. Okay, those metrics, the design of everything is fine, but now, exactly as you were saying, we're talking about an exceptionally labor-intensive context. We're talking about something that is so complicated that I can tell you as well. I mean, in 2003, in my school district, when I was the Director General of the Eastern Township School Board, we were the second school board in North America after Henrico in Virginia to provide laptops to every one of our children for free, okay, in 2003. So we were like miles ahead of everybody else. Now, what was very interesting is that we had research teams, a number of research teams over the years, conduct analysis of the effects of technology on the learning. And the main conclusion that they came out with was that there are so many variables that occur within a classroom context, it is almost, not totally, but it's almost impossible to identify one specific factor like that. So the one thing is, even in Hattie, when John Hattie talks about his research and, you know, the teacher and this, but one of the areas that came out that was student self-appraisal. Students actually have a much clearer idea of the type of work that they produce and a much more honest type of appraisal of the work they produce than other people can. Yet it's not something we look at. But from the point of view of the corporate involvement, that's where I say that they can play an extremely important role, but then not to identify a school as very much like in terms of a work site operation. It's well beyond that. It's profoundly beyond that. And I've heard many business people say to me in my entire career, but what's up with education? What's wrong with these people? Don't they get it? You know, like this? And I tell them, oh, they totally get it. You don't get it. You know, there's the issue, is that you don't understand the dynamics that happen within a classroom. You know, we had principals here last week to celebrate 40. We highlighted and signaled 40 top Canadian principals, and one of the mornings was a workshop, and it was held on the 56th floor of the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce building. And there they were looking out on this magnificent view over Lake Ontario. And I went over to a couple of them and I said, "What a view, eh?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, it sure beats looking at a leaking radiator in a classroom, wouldn't it?" And they started to laugh and said, "Yeah, you got that."
Right.
You know, there's the dynamic. And many of them were looking on their phones during the day because there's all sorts of things happening. It's a very, very different dynamic. We also conducted, very quickly here, we did a research, my former employment, Canadian Education Association, called Teaching the Way You Aspire to Teach. One of the things that we did, we surveyed thousands of teachers. We actually had focus groups with thousands of teachers across Canada, and we asked them to identify what would be the attributes of a successful teacher. What are the personal and professional attributes? The Canadian average was 32. 32 attributes. So I laughed, and whenever I would hear that, and I would say, well, the average is 32. Imagine myself as a director of human resources, or in Oshkosh, you're director of human resources, and says, okay, I'm going to post for teachers, and here are the attributes we're looking for. 32 of them. There's not one person on this planet that's going to say, that's impossible. You'll never find these people. My answer is, they're already in your classroom. They're already doing a fantastic job. You know, like this, and there's the differentiation. I think nursing is probably the closest from teaching, where these attributes are so specifically intertwined and important for the development of children. So it's wildly beyond any type of simple metric of standardized tests, results, success. Way beyond that.
The speaker that Dr. Herzog referred to, I also heard him speak because that was in the throes of site-based decision-making in the United States and I'm sure in Canada as well, because he was espousing that issue. And about 2001, when the federal No Child Left Behind legislation came into effect, site-based decision-making disappeared in the snap of a finger because it doesn't work with whole school and whole district accountability. And do you have those? Do you suffer from those same waves of change?
We actually, there was, in a number of provinces, there was this attempt to move towards site-based management. But one of the things that they quickly discovered was that site-based management is, and I'm going to be very honest and candid with you here, site-based management was based on the assumption, on the incorrect assumption, that all the principals are equal, all the principals are equally effective and great. They're not. They're not. It's just not the case. You know that in your schools, you have good principals, you have other principals that need support. It's just the nature of the context that we work in. And as a result, if you were to say, well, let's go and let's empower these people at the SiteBased, what happened? It affected equity. All of a sudden, you had some schools starting to succeed more, and you had other schools that started to plummet. And the minute you have this gap in equity, okay, that's when you have problems.
Right.
If you try to keep the equity level at about the same levels in the schools in various ways of supporting it, you're going to have a far greater chance of succeeding. I remember Professor Richard Tees out of the University of Melbourne gave a presentation here in Ontario about 10 years ago to the minister and the premier of the province as well. And one of the things that he said was, he said, if you focus on equity, you should pour the resources into the schools that need the support, and those schools that are already successful, well, you know what? They don't need that as much of a support. So try to create this and bring back this type of equity notion, and you'll have very successful systems. And research shows that in the nations where they are doing well, it's exactly what they do. It's exactly what they focus on.
Can I ask a question?
By all means.
Hey, Ron, what do you think the impact is then of this partnership, of bringing businesses and government and boards together in the way that you guys have done it? What's the impact? How would you sell it to me if you had to do that?
Yeah, okay, well, that's a great question, Alison. Firstly, the impact, and I'm going to say that even in Canada, there is trepidation to business involvement in public education. There's no doubt about it. The Canadian Teachers Federation has made statements about this, that they're concerned that, Alan Pearson, especially Pearson, they've got a big issue with Pearson.
Oh, sure.
And so they're concerned about, the role that the private sector can play. But in Canada, it's different from the United States because Canada is now the second oldest country in the world after Japan. And as a result, we've got declining demographics in terms of enrollments in schools right across Canada, with the exception of some pockets, say Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary maybe. But everywhere else, the numbers are going down, and the costs and the monies are being shifted to health. And so what's happening now is, and there's a wonderful South African expression that I use, when the watering hole shrinks, the animals look at each other in a different way. And in Canada, that's starting to happen. The watering hole is shrinking, and now all of a sudden, where people used to be partners, used to say, well, if we could all get along, well, hold on a second, we need these monies for public education, we need these monies for health. But private sector involvement can play a very important and supportive role. And again, it all goes about to how they want to do it and how they want to proceed. So in Canada, and certainly with our association and my board, I'm very proud of my board members because they have said, absolutely, we will support what they need as opposed to being told, or telling them what we think. Because they do articulate, they do say, we need people to graduate, and have these type of skill sets. But in Canada, the universities are under pressure as well now because more and more people are graduating out of universities and they're not finding any jobs in the areas that they're studying in. And so now people are questioning the university's role in terms of where it is. There's still a very high demand for trade. The trade sector is in very, very high demand here in Canada and will be growing over the next few years. But that now all of a sudden doesn't necessarily preclude that university education is the path of success or the measure of success that we've used in the past. So there's going to be some profound adjustments in Canada as well.
It would certainly be a welcome for you and members of your board to speak to business interests in the United States and Wisconsin, or to look at different perspective on expertise on education and to advise and support public education. That would be a major. We have miles to go in that theme because, frankly, that doesn't exist, and I think we're recovering now somewhat from anti-education issues that were dominant in Wisconsin in the early part of this decade, and it's as I read your materials and researched your materials, I was very refreshed by the approach you're taking.
Thank you very much.
And with
It would certainly be a pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. That's a great observation and comment. And just to put a fine point on it, Ron, looking at your board members without running through the list, you obviously have senior level people for Canada's major corporations on your board who are saying, yes, education first, and that's fantastic. Could I ask for? Oh.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, on occasion, they basically said, they still look at education sometimes as an enigma like this, but I think they're starting to realize, well, just because it's an enigma doesn't mean it's bad.
Right. Like the musical recording artists by the same name. Could we jump to a little dessert course? I'd love to share the story of the Oasis School in Toronto that we spoke of yesterday.
Yeah, so we have our tribute dinner, and Steve, I mentioned this to you, yes, and if you wanted to have some representation, we would be more than pleased to invite you to come up and attend our tribute dinner. So on the 31st of May, we are honoring two recipients. One will be the Toronto Dominion Bank, the TD Bank, that you're familiar with, I know, in the United States. They've been big supporters of public education and various programs, particularly for marginalized youth, the Indigenous youth as well. So they've been a real good support of public education. So we're going to be honoring them. And the second honorees is what we call an alternative high school, and it's called the Oasis Skateboard Factory. Now this is a school that basically takes in all of the kids that the high schools throw out. Okay, oh, I shouldn't say throw out, sorry, leave. Okay, like this, but that happens. I was a principal, I know what it's like. And these kids are kids who are basically street kids, some of them, again, very, very marginalized. And they come into this program, and it's called a school, but it's not a school. It's just a big classroom. It's just a big room. And the condition is that these kids come in, and there's 28 students to 2 teachers. So there's a ratio right away that I know some people go, oh my God, that's 14 to 1, we can't do that. But very quickly, as an aside, the former Prime Minister of Canada asked me, how would I deal with the dropout issue in Canada? Because we've got in certain provinces some pretty high dropout rates. And I said to him, well, if school boards were obliged in their long-term liabilities, the cost of every dropout that comes in a school, that they have to put it in their budget and their balance sheet, all of a sudden we would start to realize that a 14 to 1 ratio is not that expensive compared to the cost of a dropout. In Canada, it's $500,000 per dropout. That's the estimated cost, above all the other costs that become incremental, above all the other issues that happen as well in terms of possible incarceration, all these other things. So with this school here, with this ratio, what they do is they say to the kids, they give them a piece of wood, and they said, okay, here's the wood. It's a type of balsa wood, and they say, okay, make a skateboard. And you're going to design your skateboard, you're going to be shown how to cut the skateboard, so they have all this outreach into the community. And I applaud your school district, by the way, because I saw a lot of community outreach, which is a key component to a really successful education system. And so they outreach to the community where people have these minor, like small shops where they can do their bandsaws. And so they show the kids how to cut wood. And then after that, then they go to graphic designers, okay? And then the kids are shown about how to design the boards and what to do. Then they're brought over to another area in terms of the manufacturing of it, putting the wheels on, the engineering component. Then after that, they have to come up with a business plan. And once they come up with a business plan, then they have to put it on the internet, and they have to sell their skateboard. And then in that context, they also spend 2.5 hours a day receiving the academic courses that they need, the instruction they need to get their high school leaving certificates, their certification, their graduation certificates. So they do this. They have a 98% success rate. These are students who show up, and they start, by the way, based on neuroscience at high schools, where they start at 10:30 in the morning. They don't start them at 8:30. They start them at 10:30. Their attendance, in terms of absenteeism, is something less than 5%. The students call in to the teachers. There are 2 teachers. They call in to say if they're going to be late or absent, so there's no rigorous rules or structures per se. There's a lot of self-regulation that happens in these classrooms. And then once they do all of this, they sell the skateboard. So it's a remarkable program that's been in existence for about 9 years now. And they sell about 400 skateboards a year. Okay, last year they had 2 people from Shark Tank, Robert Hershevik and Kevin O'Leary showed up, and they couldn't believe the school. They said this was one of the most fascinating schools that they'd ever seen. Then last May they had a visit from somebody, well maybe some of you might know, a fellow by the name of Justin Bieber, who showed up and ordered 40 skateboards.
Nice.
And as some of the kids even told me, they said, we didn't like Justin Bieber, but you know what, if he likes their skateboards, we'll do it. And so he took 40 skateboards for his world concert and gave them away, like this, coming from this school. And so we're honoring them. And also as a form of entertainment during the day, or during the evening, the proceedings, we have another charity group called Unity Charity. And this is a group that focuses on high school kids in terms of their well-being, but they try to make them feel better through hip-hop, through rap poetry, and dancing, and this type of thing. And when they have their they have a conference every, it's not a conference, but a concert every summer in downtown Toronto. It brings in about 35 to 40,000 people. Incredibly successful. Like this, and so they attend to the well-being. So they're going to be, quote unquote, doing things and providing us the entertainment during the evening. So there you go. There's an overview of that event.
So I'm hoping that we can have a board member, and not to commit anybody, Mr. Mack or one of our administrators join you for that event, but we'll talk about that further. It's fantastic, Ron. I want to see if we have any more questions.
Yeah, I think I could combine it with, I have a son who's a PhD candidate at Lorelei University in Waterloo, Ontario, and so make very close connections. I'm frequently in Toronto.
Doesn't need a skateboard.
Cool.
And I
Well,
and
if you come to Toronto, by the way, I got to point out as well, you probably know this as well, it's 30% cheaper for you with the exchange rate.
yes, but the cost of housing is tremendously higher. So,
Just a bit higher.
yes,
Just a bit
yeah.
higher.
What is your graduation rate in Canada, or by at least by the largest population like in Ontario?
The graduation rates across the provinces, the average rate, the one province that is lowest is Quebec at about 80%. The other provinces range anywhere between 85 to 90% in that range. That's the graduation rates.
Okay. It gives perspective at ours.
So if there are no other questions, I would like to extend my deepest, most sincere thanks, Ron, for all the time you've shared with us in the phone conversations and the teeing up of the Skype electronic connection, and your very kind offer to join us, perhaps when you're flying between Buenos Aires and Paris someday, and then the conference or the awards celebration in May in Toronto. And I hope we can have a continued dialogue.
Yeah, well, Steve, we'll be in touch, because I would like to certainly come and visit you, and I could probably try to convince a corporate person to come. That might be a little bit more difficult, but I'd certainly like to come down and visit and get an opportunity to see your schools and that, because I'm always looking for inspiration, and as I said to you, I'm very impressed with what I saw with the community outreach in your schools, and I think those are the type of models that I always like to go back and bring back to Canada and share as well, because we can always be on that learning curve.
Thank you. Our team, our leadership team, has done a remarkable job in these years of bringing us upward. So thanks for sharing that observation. Could I ask, can I spring a surprise on two of our board members that I know of and sign off in your native language, Ron? Would our two board members mind?
Oh, bien
Mon
sûr.
Dieu.
At your,
Oh, you want us to do it?
I was hoping.
Oh, no, Stephanie, you should do it.
Merci beaucoup pour votre présentation.
Ça me fait plaisir de vous recevoir quand même au Canada, et que je vous remercie énormément du fait que j'ai pu quand même passer un peu de temps avec vous, et je m'excuse, j'aurais dû faire ça au début de la rencontre au lieu à la fin, mais je vous souhaite mes meilleurs vœux pour une bonne année scolaire, et voilà, et au grand plaisir.
I got about half of it.
Yeah, I got to admit, I missed
Merci
a couple
beaucoup.
words.
Merci, Ron. All right, thank you.
It's okay, because when I go to France, I'm going to be in France with the Minister of
They don't
Education,
understand you either.
and I was with the Prime Minister in December. But when I was there, it was so funny because I had a Quebec accent.
Yeah.
And so for the French people, I was always suggesting to them, you want me to have subtitles underneath what I say?
They couldn't understand your French.
Thank you so much, Ron. Have a very good evening.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. That's a good one.
All right. Well done.
Wow.
Okay.
That was amazing.
All right, so I guess we'll transition over to our communications update with Katie Neiman.
And may I just say, Steve, thank you for all the work you've done with
Yeah,
this.
that was fantastic.
The more I explored that, and with Canadian connections and a future daughter-in-law Canadian, and I've got a lot of Canadian time, but it is interesting to see the transfer that this gentleman was the national president of the teachers union.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Education Association of Canada, and he did speak with the same division that traditionally, although they have merged in this country now, between the Federation of Teachers and the Education Association. And the more I've explored that, it's an exciting organization, but I'm sure that's why his premise was, don't tell us, we'll come to you, and don't tell us what to do.
Absolutely.
So, he came out of a background that I was surprised at.
Oh, yeah. Some of us can learn things along the way, right? Sometimes we need to be reminded of that. Thank you, Stan, for everything, and to our board and our leadership team. Thanks,
Okay. Well, I'm just up here because I just want to say thank you again to the board and the community for bringing on the communication director. I cannot tell you the number of great things that we're hearing about from people because of the work that Katie is doing. And so we brought to you, or Barb Nickel had done the communication audit. And so that is what Katie is going to be sharing tonight. But truly, remember there was some recommendations that were given, and I'm just going to remind the board that those are recommendations to do over a long span of time. And Katie has taken on many of those things already behind the scenes. And one of the pieces that I hope that you've been heartened to see are all the positive stories that are out in the Northwestern or the Oshkosh Independent as a result of her handiwork. So anyway, I'm going to stop and I'm just going to let her talk now.
Right.
Perfect, thank you. So you'll notice on the screen I've kind of outlined the recommendations that most of you already received when that in-depth review was conducted of the audit. So I don't want to go into too much detail there, but I just wanted to provide it as a framework, noticing that what I've taken and highlighted is what I've been able to start to address. In no way do I mean to say that this is accomplished and we're checking it off our radar. It's not the case at all, but rather it's things that I've been able to either learn from, look into, or start moving forward. So with each of these, I'll be explaining them in more detail as I go through this presentation, but I think that just sets a good framework as far as detailing what those 6 recommendations that the audit revealed and then how we're moving those forward. So then within this presentation, I really want to focus on 3 different things. The first being the recommendations within this audit. The second being the progress that's being made to the strategic plan, specifically priority area 2 related to improving district communication. And then lastly, dig a little bit deeper and show some real examples of the communication content that we're putting out there. Certainly if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, I'll open it up to some general conversation after this. So then switching into the strategic plan, because I find myself very fortunate to be able to rely on both the audit and the strategic plan to really lead my work. So in reference to the strategic plan, you'll see Goal 2A and Goal 2B are already 100% complete, so we won't necessarily focus too much on that. But Goal 2C, 37% complete, and that's, in my mind, really where the bulk of my work is right now. That goal is to develop a district-wide brand communication and marketing plan. So right now I have a plan in working draft form. The next step will be to come back and present that all to you in detail with a timeline in April or May of this year. Again, to be able to map out what that looks like and also attach some actual timelines to it. Because as I'm sure you remember from when even the audit was conducted, there's a lot of things to tackle, but it's a matter of what timeline can we put in place that makes sense and is also realistic for this role to move forward. One thing to note, and obviously we'll be talking more about this as we go on, but within the plan that I have drafted, I've started with 5 main communication goals. And they're listed on the screen here, but each of those tie directly into the communication audit recommendations, or they're things that I've picked up during my time in the district and in conversations and experiences that I've had so far. Moving on to Goal 2D, this overall goal, 55% complete. And if you remember, there's 3 different parts to this, all surrounded or around improving district communication channels. So that first is the website, noted as 99% complete. It was transitioned, obviously, before my time here to a Google platform. By no means do I want to take credit for that, because it's certainly been a lot of work done by our technology team that's ongoing. Couple things to note that they've been able to bring forward this year alone has been the addition of some language links on our homepage, as well as a staff directory, again focusing on how can we make that website more user-friendly for our entire community. In addition to that, on a regular basis, what I look to do is bring to life any additional pages that I think would be helpful to both our district families and then visitors, community members, as well as they're using the site and wanting information. So I've just called out 2 examples there, one being a dedicated communication page. Here I house a newsroom, so to speak, so you can go in there and see all of the media releases or stories that we're putting out there. And I think from the visitor standpoint, it's a wonderful way for anybody to see really at a glance everything that our district, our schools are doing. The second page noted there is an emergency information page. This really came to light as we were working to improve our communications as it relates to crisis and emergency communication. So starting with a resource page for our families so that we set the expectation of how will we be communicating in the event of emergency, as well as what resources can we provide them so that their contact information is up to date and they have an understanding of what to expect from the district. The other example that I have up there really relates to how our departments are using the website. One of the nice things is that our staff members, those that have page ownerships, can make edits in real time, but I'm also there for a resource for them. So if there's an instance where there's a lot of content on our page, or we're looking to find a way to make a page more user-friendly, I'm happy to work with any staff member to be able to map that out in a way that's a little more user-friendly. The next portion of Goal 2D is about social media. For anybody that follows us currently, hopefully you've been noticing some changes to the district's social media presence. Right now, in addition to more regular updates, I'm also in the midst of creating a social media database and page structures. By this I mean bringing all of the existing pages that exist for each of our schools in the district under the district umbrella so that there's a tie-in, both for the sake of consistency and then also how can we collectively reach a greater audience between both our schools and the district as a whole. So moving on to that next bullet there, I just wanted to do a quick call out just because, as I stated, Facebook and Twitter is really where our presence is right now, so it's how do we grow that. And I just did a quick screenshot there. But I think each and every day we always get new likes, which is great. Our community is interested in following what we're doing. But what I find even more exciting is the increase in engagement and in reach that we're able to start to get on a more regular basis. And that happens with the content, the stories that we're able to post. People are interested about it, they're participating in it, and then they're also sharing it within their own networks, which is exciting. That final portion, 31%, and as I stated there, I don't have an update at this time. Obviously, it's still very much on radar when it comes to looking into how the district uses video, but I'm not quite yet in a position where we can delve into that. Anybody that's familiar with video knows that it's an undertaking that will require a lot of preparation and then obviously ensuring that we have the content to go along with it. So moving away from the specifics of the strategic plan, like I said, I wanted to give an overview of really what pieces have I been working on creating on a regular basis. The first starts with media relations. You'll see there to date, we've developed 17 press releases. I would say most, if not all of them, have been picked up by at least one media outlet, which goes into the next point of media relations is something that I'm constantly working on. I've developed a media database with both local and regional contacts. And then it's anytime those stories come to my desk or we are developing those press releases, it's picking up the phone, it's pitching those ideas, and hopefully getting the media interested in covering what we have going on right here in Oshkosh. And that obviously falls in line with handling media requests. Sometimes it's on a daily basis, which I feel fortunate to be able to capitalize on Superintendent Mack's willingness and availability to be present for the media. So as a district, we're able to capitalize on that. And then, as Kim mentioned, I would be remiss if I left out mentioning the great communication outlet that we find ourselves in now as an entire community. The 3 local news sources that we have been receptive to the district, and you can see there, they're picking up on our stories and they're sharing our good news, which is very exciting.
And they're kind of competing for getting
take it.
their share,
Yep.
yes, so, which is very nice.
That's fun.
Yeah. And not
Absolutely.
having honor rolls and as student academics honored for a long time, but the excitement that the Herald was most interested in doing in creating the feature for us.
Definitely. So very appreciative of all they're doing, and I can only see that growing in the future. The next is really where I'm wanting to spend a lot of my time, because I think that's really the meat of where this position can really excel. And that is telling our good news. So one of the things I came to understand is I need a process that works long term. There are so many great things happening in each of our schools, but unless I'm aware of it, I can't be that extra mouthpiece. So what I've recently rolled out a couple weeks ago is an internal request process, a simple form that any staff member can fill out at any time and share a story request or a news idea with me that I'll then take and either circle back with them if I need more information or take it and run with it. And that these are just some of the examples of spotlights that we've been able to create from them, spotlighting a successful family nights at an elementary school, a successful staff award, and then students that are doing great things in our district. On a similar chain, the same process used for promoting events, both helping in the promotion process and then in the coverage process after event. And these are just some of the examples also tied into that is as these things are happening in our schools, how are we letting the community know about them? So I see it as extremely important that we are continuing to develop our district brand. Right now it's really seen on social media and then any other media that we can get to pick it up. So these are just a few of those examples that as you see, hopefully as these start to come across, our community members, they understand that this is a district voice and these are things that are happening within our Oshkosh schools. A couple more things here. The next are really what I call ghostwriting for just the reality of what it is. And it's not meant to overstep anything, but rather how can I be a resource to school leaders, to really school messages so that we're communicating with a consistent voice and in a way that the audience feels like they are informed and a part of the conversation process as well. The next 2 things with the community newsletter, I think this is something that Oshkosh as a whole will be looking forward to, and it's how can we do a more regular outreach to our community. So what I'm working on now is to develop what I imagine to be a quarterly e-newsletter that focuses on feature stories that can tie back to our strategic plan and the success we're having, but open it up to any community member that wants to get it into their inboxes with the ideal long-term goal of being able to have print pieces in households throughout Oshkosh. And then the last element there is district reports, similar to newsletters. I think they'll continue to develop. Obviously, our relationship with Oshkosh for Education is just one of our examples that we're able to create information along the lines of, but I think, again, it's what can we be doing to make sure that we're taking the information and bringing it to a larger audience. So what I wanted to close with is obviously quite a few things are on my radar that I'm able to work on now, and then also what I'm hoping to tackle in the coming months. So I've just kind of outlined, and a lot of this goes back to really going back to those recommendations in the communication audit. I think you've heard it many times that in addition to sharing all the good news, focusing on our internal audiences will be my next step. And I would say my reason for delay somewhat at this point is I really needed to get an understanding of how the world of education works before I could enter into it. So, you know, I think my months here so far I've really spent observing how is internal communication happening within our schools, what messages are getting out, and what channels can we put in place that bring a little bit more consistency to those as well. So those are, like I said, examples. I think we'll continue to evolve this after we continue to move forward in a plan with all of your assistance and go from there. So kind of threw a lot of information at you. Hopefully it was helpful to get that better perspective of where our communication efforts are right now. Certainly if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if you've been hearing things yourself and have feedback, I'd love to hear that at any time.
Well, I just have noticed the increased presence on Facebook.
Sure.
And people liking and people sharing what you post to other areas of the Facebook. The 3 newspapers that we have now are picking it up. Any movement with our local radio people at all?
I think they are regularly seeking out people to interview. I think most often when we do send out releases, they'll give me a call and see if there's someone I can get them in contact with. I think most recently when we publicized Oshkosh North Counseling Team winning that state award, we had 2 radio stations give me a call and want to speak with either a counselor or a principal at North. So I think that's ongoing. I think obviously it always depends on what news we're putting out there, but I've definitely felt interest across all outlets.
And our network TV stations in Green Bay, are they showing some interest in Oshkosh?
They are. I would say, our most often it's related to weather in Wisconsin.
Exciting place to live.
Yeah, but in my mind, and I know Stan is on kind of this agreement, we take those opportunities to, one, be in front of our audiences, and then also establish those relationships with those outlets so they know that we're receptive to them coming to Oshkosh and helping them get the stories that their viewers are interested in.
And Katie knows that in an effort to continue to bring as much public relations to the district, I never say no to anybody. And so she can promise that if we can arrange the time, we'll do it. And so by doing that, it's a very comfortable setting to be that they know the reporters turn over far faster than I would like them to, because you'd like to get to know them better. But it's a very comfortable environment for them to know that I will be available and answer their questions. And doing radio and television is very comfortable for me. It's not an issue, and I know that I've discovered through my Fox Valley superintendent's colleagues that most of my colleagues would just as well say no, or they don't understand why would the media would ever want to be a party to it. And when they say no, it's not helpful to their organizations, and they get so nervous and uptight about it, and it's not anything that those people are just trying to do their job. One of the things Katie does also is making sure that she usually knows that I know the subject matter, but she also prepares bullet points of things that I shouldn't miss in the conversation. And that is very helpful in the fact that we are more complete in our response by having that preparation and being able to do that. And because of conflict, Dave did one last week with one of the news media that Katie had prepared for us the bullet points, and doing that and being comfortable with it. And I've tried to teach colleagues around the region that life will be more difficult if they see you sweat. If you're comfortable with them, they'll be happy to have a story and be comfortable with dealing with the issue.
I want to thank you for doing this report. I had been one of the people requesting it because I felt it was important to get the word out about our communication.
I absolutely agree.
So I'm really pleased with what you've presented and the quality of that.
Thank you.
In the spirit of continuous improvement, there's one area I would really like to see improved,
Okay.
and that is communicating to the board the many activities that are going on in the school district.
Yeah.
You can go to the front, you can go to the homepage, and you can get what board committees are out there, but you can't find where is tomorrow night's concert,
Sure.
or those kinds of things. I find myself furiously writing when our students are here, what high school activities are going on. That shouldn't be the way I find out information, or the community does, or this board. And so I would really like to see an easy way of getting access to those activities. In statute, Wisconsin Statute 120.12 sub 2 says that one of the jobs of the school board is to visit and examine the schools of the district. If we know what activities are out there, we can go. If we don't know, we're not likely to go. We used to have a homepage that had that access. We haven't had it for at least 5 years, and I find that very frustrating. And then I have community members coming to me and saying, when is the ball game on Thursday night? Or where is the ball game? Is it home or is it away? And there is not an easy way, or at least people are not finding an easy way to do that. Maybe it's a means of educating me and the people that were asking me about those things, but it doesn't seem to be easy for people to find out what's going on so that they can attend them. There are lots of people who would like to attend events, but they won't or can't if they're not aware of them. So that would really be helpful, and that would be something that would not just benefit me, but the entire community.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There is a system of retrieval, and because there are so many events going on that there's no one sheet of paper that or anything for a given date of how many events are going on in a given night, with the exception of Wednesday nights. We had intended, and because of the complication with all of your meetings with the superintendent search, we deferred to not have that, but we'd love to have a workshop time that we could lead you through the process. Dave has prepared a instructional opportunity of about a half hour, 45 minutes, Dave, that could show you to download all the things quite easily that you are really interested in, because you would, if you try to get everything, you couldn't get everything that is occurring on one given night. But there is a way of retrieval, and we would love to be able to share that.
Actually, every WIA school's using exactly the same system. Exactly.
I'm not just talking.
Is that just sports, though?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
well, I
sports
don't-
and activities now. It depends. One of the things we're working with the two activities directors is getting them to enter the same stuff in the same system. And also in Oshkosh, our rec department is also adding in that same system for their site reservations, going paperless right now. So all of that's probably going to be in the same exact place, which should be a little bit easier. But I can tell you right now, if you want everything on your calendar, you will have a very difficult time reading it just due to the quantity of appointments that will overlap each other. So you probably are going to want to think in terms of, do you want just the varsity events? Do you want all the events? And that's going to be part of what we kind of share out is you can subscribe to whatever you wish, but if you subscribe to all, it's going to be a lot of stuff.
I just want to see it. And I want it to be easy.
Right.
I don't want to learn a complicated system. I don't want to subscribe to stuff. I just want a place where anybody, including mortals like me, can go and find it.
Yep.
Can we do that?
Excuse me, there are numerous examples of that. I regularly am on school district websites because of the nature of the work I do at the university. And it's possible to do that without, I don't want to download every possible activity, but I'd like to be able to go to a place and say, on Thursday, March 8th,
What is going on?
what's going on, or what time is the concert at such and such a building. That's all I want. I don't want to download the entire WIAA schedule. And if it takes 45 minutes to educate the board on that,
That's not the right
what about
answer.
the public out there who is trying to get this information? So that's not what I'm asking for. I'm just asking for a simplified system that we used to have where we could access music activities, athletic activities, and find out what's going on and where and when. That's all. I know it's possible. I see them on websites every day. Well, maybe once a week, but not every day.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. I think it's something, along those lines of continuous improvement that we're constantly looking for that improvement. I think, though it's not a solution, I think another option there is taking our calendars and doing snippets of them, looking at when it's concert time. I think all of us know when those will be happening. Creating PDFs that we can at least be promoting that list them. Granted, anytime they're changed, that'll be that manual review process, but I think if nothing else, it's those steps that we can take to address those until a long-term solution is more widely available.
With 22 different school locations and other programs, we are a bit more complicated than districts with singular high schools and singular. It does make it far more complicated, and I know that my calendar that Sherry maintains and then provides both print and online, it eventually, the nighttime activities become so compressed that you have to open them one at a time in order to discover what's all there, because there are so many activities to choose from at any given night. And it's no longer readable at that highest level. So.
Other questions?
I do.
Yes, sir?
Yep. Well, first I want to thank you for sending off that audit to me yesterday.
Absolutely.
And again to the board, because I wasn't on the board when it was distributed, so I appreciate that. Stan knows this. I've talked to you about it. I alluded to it in my email. It was great seeing Stan, Julie, and forgotten. Katie. Thank you. I'm sorry.
That's right behind you, Bob.
Sorry. On Ion Oshkosh. Yep. So I think that's a great platform, mainly because it's going to get that older population of people, which is that segment of.
I watched it.
The segment of our community that we really want to see what we're doing. And so I think the more that we can get our faces on TV to promote our district, the better our message is going to be conveyed to our community. So I think that's really important. I think it's really easy to get caught up in social media because that's the trend of the day. But in the end, TV is one of our best tools that we have out there to get our message out. So I think if we want to talk about how quick our message can fly around, social media is our greatest tool for that. But getting an articulated message about what we do is really important, and Ion Oshkosh was perfect for that. So more media of that sort, I think, is really important because it gives you guys the times to articulate what's going on. Secondly, I'd like to suggest that as a board spotlight, that we showcase our children at one of our board meetings every month. And I've seen it a couple different times where we've brought in students to kind of talk about a project that they worked on or anything like that. Again, I think it's a really good avenue for us to showcase our children and what they're doing in our district. And it's our time. We don't have to pay for that. It's our time to be able to do that. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that. And not both meetings, but maybe the public, the meeting where we invite the public to come and express more often. That would also be the time that we also showcase children. So, and then I really like the idea of spotlighting what children do, staff do, and certain programs and organizations that are beneficial to our community's education. And so you talked about providing access to staff, about being able to showcase those types of experiences. I'd also like you to maybe provide us that access also, because I think sometimes we go into schools and we see something that may be just as easy just to fill in some of this information for you to follow up with when you have time. So and I think part of it is that we really want to be involved in making your success happen through all of this. Sure. So as much as you can to incorporate us, we want to support you in doing that. So I think your role is a very integral role in promoting our district. And so I think every single one of us at this table really want to make sure that you're really successful in doing that. So please think of us, of where we can assist you.
Absolutely.
So-
First off, I appreciate that. I think as we move forward, that kind of ties into that focus on internal communications, because I very much view the board, all board members, as part of our internal communications, because it has to be that two-way sharing of information. As a quick fix, I would say anytime that you do have ideas, send me an email, stop over, give me a call. I'm happy to take those, because obviously sometimes it's happening quick, or it's a last minute thought, but dropping me a line at any time is what I'm looking to just develop more.
Yep, sure.
Thank you so much. I think I said last meeting that I really appreciate all the stuff you've been sending out on social media, and it's so nice to have a place where we can brag about all the great stuff we do,
Yes.
and it's been great to see. I did have a question about Facebook pages and whether or not you had a chance to do an audit of all the Facebook pages that are out there, because sometimes we have teachers that create pages, and sometimes we have like South Park science class create pages, and so I'm just wondering if you've looked into that.
Yep, so that's what I meant by that social media database that
Okay.
I'm in the midst of creating. Really starting with working with principals for them to identify, obviously, because more often than not, they're the ones that know, what pages do exist. Creating a working database of that, and then finding a way to bring that into an official title so that the district name can be associated with all those pages. We can have a contact within the district so that permissions or ownerships are never lost. So certainly a work in progress. I would expect, within the next month or so that we'll have that in a completed format that can be just more easily updated when a page is created versus backtracking.
Right. And actually, I was going to tell Barb that is a great way to get information from schools too, is follow their Facebook pages, because a lot of them have great Facebook pages that have a lot of good information too.
Sure,
So,
thank you.
But anyway, thank you.
They'll be able to, even though you're gonna ask for all these Facebook pages, you're not going to use some of that information, correct? Because we do have elementary teachers who every year create a Facebook page for that class, and parents opt into that, knowing that their child and their pictures and stuff won't be shared. It's just for the class pictures, it's just for that year.
Right.
They don't want that everywhere. Is that still will stay intact, correct?
Right. My
Teachers,
frame
if they want that.
would be tying in when it's a page that's representing a school, not a class
Not
or
a
not
classroom
a
or a
PTO.
teacher. Okay,
But,
okay.
so at least
Great.
there's one official page per
Per
school
school.
if that
Okay.
school is choosing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions for?
I would just like to add that as a follow-up to our discussion with the host of Eye on Oshkosh, and she was interested in having a chance to visit with me once more and with our new superintendent. She's modified her recording schedule, and the Thursday, the last week of June, the last Thursday of the month of June, and Vicki and I will be jointly with her on a transition conversation about my leaving and Vicki coming, and so we'll have a chance to introduce in a kind of that social setting a chance to jointly do a recording of that program, and the host worked with the schedulers at OCAT to make that work, and because I knew that Vicki had indicated she was going to be in town that entire last week of June, and so after our working together and jointly hosting, I think would be appropriate, the school board meeting on that Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we'll do a joint recording of that program, and make for another part of my commitment to you as a board with doing transition well, and to have Vicki be a party to that joint program on the last Thursday, and will be distributed. And Julie discovered that it's available rather rapidly after the event, because you checked it out the same. Yeah, it's
I just
I
go
thought.
see where it's supposedly going to be, and then it's like right
Right, so, and so it was rather quickly, so we'll have a nice transition conversation with the program host, and we'll work through that and make sure that works right down to the end.
Good. Okay. Well, I think we're done with this. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next is request for future agenda items. Yes, Barb.
I would like to suggest, since the March 21st meeting currently has only one item on it, but we know there will be others, there will be a variety of resolutions to approve, that we do the board's self-evaluation that night, so that we don't need to do a separate night.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that idea.
I do too. Everybody okay with that?
Because usually that second meeting is rather short, and I think we could
Just stay.
address it. And
go to closed session and do it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
the rest of you agree with that?
Yep. Steve, you good with that? Kelly?
Yeah.
Or obviously, I'm okay. Good. Jim?
I'm not
Okay.
sure that's grounds for a closed session.
Probably not.
Oh, no? Oh, okay, I don't remember.
Yeah,
Okay, we can
because
do it.
it would be a publicly posted
That's okay.
meetings, just
That's
as
all right.
part of that. Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what day now you're
The
thinking?
21st.
Because we had the,
Yeah, we'll just not do it
we're not
that
going to do it
night.
the 13th?
No,
then?
we'll do it on the 21st.
So the
and we'll do it
13th
one
is
night rather
canceled,
than
and we're
trying-
moving that to the 21st.
Okay.
Does that mean I have longer to do my?
It does.
Is there, I did not. Any other requests for future agenda items? I would like to see us follow up somehow with what we just did tonight with Ron.
Yes.
And I don't know
Yeah.
what that looks like. One of the things that I'm thinking of is, what can we do as a board? Not to necessarily emulate exactly what they've done, but there's some good stuff here, and I don't want to lose it. So I don't know what it looks like, but I want us to talk about it.
We should have a,
Can we just have like an open discussion about our meeting with him, and maybe a bullet points that we want to hit on or something?
and how we might capitalize on that, roll that forward, that harness some of that energy?
We could certainly put that on as first meeting of the month of April, as a workshop discussion. I think I find the whole thing very fascinating, but his advice is really contrary to what the authorities in the state of Wisconsin and Washington are telling us what to do. And the issue is that we may not be in the position to do our own thing, but it's good to explore what would be the ideal. Because I think they're right on with what they're doing and what they intend to do. But the powers in Oshkosh alone in the state of Wisconsin, working with the rules that come out of Madison and the things that come out of Washington, we would be a renegade and without state or federal revenue if we did our own thing.
We'll follow the rules.
Right. But I think it's worth
Push
it
against them.
because they are doing
Or
some
we'll
exciting
change
things, and after Steve put us in touch with that, I've been doing a fair amount of follow-up with them because I do find that the direction they're going is exciting, but what can we do alone when there's no business partnership per se?
Right, right.
But certainly worth exploring.
I think so.
That sounds great.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other future agenda items? Nothing? Okay, announcements. All right, then I need a motion to.
May I just
sorry.
make an announcement? You should be aware that we've been working with our principals, elementary, secondary principals, on appropriately handling if there is school safety participation in the school safety walkout discussion. We've prepared them. Principals will be, in fact, Katie's been involved in preparing the script for principals to communicate the information about having parents call in for excuses for their students to participate. But at the elementary level, in follow-up discussion after we dealt with the entire discussion with secondary principals and knowing full well that these activities, none of us are comfortable with elementary children going out of school on their own by themselves. that the invitation will be that if a parent wants their child to participate in, that we will ask the parent to come to be a party to that activity, and that the nightmare with all the security measures we have is to suddenly have 30 or 40 elementary children out in the front of a school is an invitation for disaster that we would never want to permit. And our elementary principals are very right on that issue, and Katie and I met with them for quite some time after our earlier meeting that if parents wish to initiate something with their own child, they may do so, but they just call in and they'll be excused and treated as excused, but operating much like they're taking their child to the dentist or like they're taking their child to the doctor. But elementary children being outside of a building when we work so hard all day to keep them secure is simply ludicrous on our part. But secondary, it's also a call in to excuse your child to allow them to participate, and that's what we'll work from, is treating it like a doctor or medical excuse for the child to participate. Several of you have heard that every morning I say a prayer about safety for kids for every day, because since Columbine, that's been part of my haunt of my life and my responsibility, and for us to do anything that would set children out in an exposed area without parent either permission, or with the elementary children without the full protection of elementary children. Our entire focus is on the whole issue of school safety. It is never the discussion about issues regarding firearms. That's not our business, but school safety is our message, and that's where we're working from. And any other direction of that is a division in the community of which we don't need to be a party to. But what's most important to us? Safety of children, and that's what we're focusing on.
Thank you, Stan.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, any other announcements?
I would, just to kind of go on that, I would say that that's probably the same exact thing that the students that are partaking in this event over the next month and in April are right in line with that same thought, Stan. So I think would probably be music to their ears to know that the superintendent is also on page with that. So.
Okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay, I guess you have to call a roll.
Arlen,
Aye.
Eliason,
Aye.
Evans,
Aye.
Garner,
Aye.
Herzog,
Aye.
Olmsted,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
motion carried.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you.